It was the fall of 1974 when the town of Beckford, nestled quietly in the New England countryside, became the epicenter of one of the most disturbing poltergeist cases ever investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren. At first glance, the small colonial house on the outskirts of Beckford looked utterly ordinary. A white picket fence, flower beds, and an old oak tree swaying in the yard gave no hint of the terror waiting inside. The family who lived there, the Harpers, had only recently moved in, excited to start a new chapter. But within just weeks, their dream home became a nightmare. It began innocently. A misplaced object here, a strange thumping noise there. The Harpers, George, his wife Ellen, and their 2 young daughters, chalked it up to settling sounds or the stress of moving. But the noises grew louder, more distinct. Footsteps echoed through empty rooms. Knocking on walls came in patterns, deliberate, intelligent. The first undeniable sign that something was wrong came one evening when Ellen Harper set the dining table for dinner. She left the room for just a moment, and returned to find all the chairs stacked upside down on the table, in a precise and unnatural arrangement. No one had entered the room. The girls were outside. George had been with her. That night, Ellen was awakened by a sound she would later describe as a low growl. When she turned on the light, she saw deep scratch marks gouged into the bedroom wall, claw-like, angry, and fresh. As days passed, the activity escalated rapidly. Objects hurled themselves across rooms with invisible force. Doors slammed shut without warning, locking family members inside. The air in the house grew heavy, charged, and oppressive. Ellen began to hear whispers, sometimes calling her name, when she was alone. And George, a skeptic by nature, couldn't explain why his tools in the basement were being twisted and bent as if by immense pressure. The children were the most affected. 9-year-old Emily spoke of a shadow man who stood in the corner of her room each night, silently watching. Her younger sister, Lily, began to sleepwalk and was found several times trying to walk out into the woods behind the house in the middle of the night, whispering, "He's calling me." In desperation, the Harpers contacted their local priest. A blessing was performed, but instead of peace, it seemed to enrage whatever entity resided in the house. That same night, the family was awakened by the sound of shattering glass. Every mirror in the house had been broken, from the large one in the hallway to a small hand mirror in the bathroom. Word of the case soon reached Ed and Lorraine Warren. At the time, they had just concluded another investigation in Massachusetts, but the severity of the Beckford case caught their attention. They arrived at the Harper home within days. From the moment they stepped inside, Lorraine said she could feel the energy pulsing through the walls. She would later recall, it was like stepping into a room full of screaming souls. The air itself didn't want us there. Ed began by interviewing the family, noting the patterns of activity, the timeline, and the specific rooms most affected. Lorraine, a clairvoyant and trance medium, walked the home to sense spiritual presence. She quickly identified a particular area in the basement where the malevolent energy was strongest. She refused to go near it without prayer. They began their investigation in earnest. Cameras, audio recorders, and holy relics were placed throughout the home. Within the first night, they recorded unexplained knocking, voices speaking in guttural tones, and cold spots that dropped the temperature by over 20 degrees in seconds. But it wasn't until Lorraine attempted a séance that the true horror revealed itself. As she slipped into a trance, her body tensed and her breathing changed. Speaking in a voice not her own, she cried out a name, Jacob. Through Lorraine, the spirit identified itself as Jacob Billings, a man who had once lived on the land in the late 1800s. According to local records later uncovered by Ed, Jacob had been accused of murdering his wife and 2 children, and legend had it he had taken his own life in the basement, the very place where Lorraine felt the strongest force. The séance turned violent. The table levitated and slammed down with a thunderous crash. Lorraine was thrown from her chair, hitting the wall behind her. Ed rushed to her side as crucifixes fell from the walls, one by one. Following this terrifying event, Ed and Lorraine determined the presence in the house was not just a spirit, it was a poltergeist manifestation, fueled by rage, guilt, and unfinished business. They believed the entity had been awakened by the presence of the children, especially Emily, whose sensitivity seemed to act like a lightning rod for supernatural activity. The Warrens performed a cleansing ritual, assisted by Father Matthew, a priest from the diocese who had worked with them before. The ritual lasted for hours. The entity resisted, lights flickered, growls echoed from the basement, and a thick, black mist was seen forming in the stairwell. But finally, after a grueling night, there was silence. For the first time in weeks, peace returned to the Harper home. In the weeks following, the Warrens stayed in touch with the family. The activity had diminished dramatically. Emily no longer saw the shadow man. The voices had stopped. The mirrors remained intact. But the emotional scars lingered. Ellen later admitted she couldn't bring herself to go into the basement again. George started attending church regularly for the first time in his life. And Emily, though physically unharmed, carried memories that haunted her into adulthood. As for the Warrens, the Beckford Poltergeist case remained one of their most intense experiences. Lorraine described it as a battle not just against a spirit, but against something darker, a force born of tragedy and rage, twisted over time into pure malice. To this day, the Beckford house stands, its current residents unaware of the horrors that once unfolded within its walls. But Ed once said, "Just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's not there. Evil has a way of hiding in plain sight. And sometimes, it waits."